Right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our CAWASA webinar series. This is number 10 for the 2022 period. And this evening, we are going to be, our presenter this evening is none other than the director for the Water Resource Management Agency in St. Lucia, who has started in that department over the years as someone involved as a technical person in the information systems, and has made his way up the system as the director and has had considerable experience in water resource management. So I'm sure you have met with him previously. Mr. Jason Ernest is no stranger to this forum. And so I'm now going to invite Mr. Jason Ernest to tell us about, well, the topic today. Let me also say that we are still observing World Water Day, which was observed on yesterday. And so we continue with this. And of course, we'll move a hearty toast to the people who work in the water sector and make running water run. And all of those of you who help to preserve the resource or to conserve the resource and to make sure that people get to appreciate the true value of this important resource to all of us for lives and livelihoods. So this evening, we will be looking at trying to incorporate the topic groundwater, as is the theme for World Water Day, groundwater, making the visible invisible. But in this sense, usually about this time of the year, we are moving into the drier periods of the year. And we look at drought management, and that is seen where this resource sometimes disappears from us in an extended drought period. And we are going to look at strategies for coping with the decline in water supply. And Mr. Jason Ernest will lead on that this evening. So thank you, Mr. Ernest, for agreeing to deliver that topic for us at short notice, but I know you will do well. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jason.
All right, thank you very much for that, Mr. Jean. From the time we spoke until now, I did my best in order to put a presentation together. So hopefully persons would find it interesting. I would like to welcome all invitees. Thank you for being here. Like Mr. Jean said, yesterday was celebrated as World Water Day. I think it was the 29th year of celebrating, but like we know, every day is World Water Day because we use water every day. So we use water to use water in a sense. When we get up, we use it, and then throughout our daily activities, we also use that resource. And it's basically a day to raise the awareness of the billions of persons that don't have access to clean water and sanitation. And in some sense, it has happened here before. It is happening where because of deficits in water availability, persons have to access water that may not be deemed clean in a sense. So definitely water resources is a very interesting topic. So I will move into my presentation. Let's see now. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we got you. Yeah.
Okay, so the topic is drought management, strategies for coping with declining water supply. So in essence, my reference would be from a St. Lucia context. In case I don't make reference to where I'm speaking to. So if it's some other jurisdiction, I would probably see. But in essence, it would be more or less related to St. Lucia. Okay. So just looking at drought, just looking at taken from the WMO webpage, drought is a prolonged dry period in the natural climate cycle that can occur anytime in the world. It is a slow onset phenomenon caused by a lack of rainfall. And at this point in time, we're primarily at the height of the dry season. The dry season in St. Lucia is from November to May. So at this point, we're at the height of the dry season. Well, I guess persons would see that it is raining, thankfully. So in terms of having the issues that have occurred during past years, that has not happened as yet, but there are still issues. So as we go along, we can speak about it, and probably in the conversation that can come up as well. So our climate change projection shows that definitely we're looking at declining water supplies. So all projections indicate a general trend of increasing mean annual temperatures and decreasing precipitation amounts. So if you look at the GCM or the RCM, it would tell you that there are rises in the temperature and decreases in annual precipitation. So our type of drought. So we're looking at the meteorological drought, hydrological drought, and the agricultural drought. Normally during this time, we experience the onset of the meteorological, then the agricultural. You know, the two are closely related in terms of the amount of moisture in the soil. And we look at the hydrological being over a long-term period. So there is still room for discussion in terms of whether we are actually into a hydrological drought because of the nature of the island and our flows, which are generally low flows. And we know that our rainfall deficits, or when we experience some intense dry spells, it's normally in the period that we would expect it anyway. And if we're looking at our trends, except for in the past, in the near past, except for 2010, we went outside of that for a very significant time where we did not receive rainfall. But normally by end of May, June, we start to get some rains coming back into the system to give us a top up. So a susceptibility map, drought susceptibility map was done back in 2007. And I just want persons to see the legend where it says in terms of the color codes for the susceptibility from low to high. So this was the map that was created for St. Lucia. And as we can see that the areas that are leaning towards high for susceptibility of drought, I would say also slash extreme dry spells. It's more or less the coastal area and somewhat into the interior. But into the interior, it's more or less average or what have you. But the key to take from that, which we do not see, is that for some watersheds, the susceptibility is far greater than in other watersheds. So then in terms of water availability in those areas, when we have like drought-like conditions, it would be more pronounced than in other areas where in the upper reaches, the susceptibility for drought is pretty low. So there are still some kind of orographic effects happening in those areas, even during those times there. In the last well, that should be in the last 10 years, we've had 4 major drought intense dry spells. So 2010, 2014, 2015, and 2020. 2014, 2015, sometimes it almost seems that it is recorded as 1 year. But actually there were 2 declarations during that year. So for 2020, that's when we had the last declaration. And I just want to just give us just basically a graphical representation of rainfall in the month of April across the from 2000 to 2020. So you can see the general trend of rainfall in April, for the month of April. In 2010, we had a significant dry spell, drought. 2010 I could consider to be a drought. But if you look and you see the amount of rainfall compared coming up from 2014, you'd realize that rainfall during that time there was much greater compared to 2014. Now, in that period there, what happened is that at that time, the John Compton Dam was operating optimally in terms of that its capacity to retain water was almost at an ideal. So even during that time here, where we realized from 2005 2006 there was low precipitation for the month of April, the dam was doing what it needed to do in terms of, like, during that period it was designed to provide water. So there was enough water in the reservoir to feed the north of the island. And then we know in 2010 that's when we had Thomas, and conditions change. So like I mentioned, we had the drought from in 2014, 2015. And then if you look at 2020, you can see that precipitation decreased significantly for the month of April, and that was going into the height of the drought period. And in the system, it was noticed from March that the volumes were actually decreasing. So this photo shows that normally in St. Lucia, our base flows are normally low flows. So a flow like this around the month of January, February, we consider it to be very good, especially for our major rivers, right? So in other jurisdictions, it would probably be higher. You know, you have bigger rivers, your watersheds are larger. You can accommodate, it can accommodate more water is stored in the soil. But in St. Lucia, for our watersheds, a flow like that, which is low, but still from a water resources point of view, it is very satisfactory at that level in the system. Yeah. Now, in terms of the management, what we have on an institutional level, we have a flood and drought mitigation committee. That committee was formed from the year 2009, and it actually came out of investigation that was done by a number of governmental institutions that had to do with fish kill in the Corinth River. So from that grouping, it actually morphed into the Flood and Drought Mitigation Committee. That is chaired by the director of the Met Services. It's co-chaired by the WRMA, and other members include Wasco Forestry, NEMO, Ministry of Health, Agriculture, Chamber of Commerce, and a few others that are currently not there. But those are the core attendees to our meetings, and this is held on a monthly basis on the second Thursday of every month. The last time we met on a twice monthly was during the crisis of 2020, where water availability was extremely low. And during those meetings, what do we do? Well, we have presentations from, our primary presentations are from the Met Services, Water Resources, Wasco, Environmental will probably give an update based if you're looking at what's happening with uptick of waterborne diseases, what have you. They would probably give a report. Ministry of Tourism would also report in terms of water supply for the hotels and what have you. So we look at what's happening in the surface analysis. We look at local conditions, previous rainfall coming up to the month that we're actually reporting on. We look at the deficits in rainfall. We'd also look at in what kind of conditions the Caribbean finds itself. You know, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, whether we move into a La Nina phase, whether it's a weak La Nina or strong El Nino, all of this is taken into consideration to see exactly our current conditions, how does it mesh with moving forward. We have our forecast summary that is on a local level. The water resources would also give information about a number of other rainfall stations that we monitor. For climatic data, the Met Services monitor George F.L. Charles and Hiranora. So those are the two stations where they have the longest record period for on island. For the WRMA, some of our stations are younger, but we do more reporting over the island because conditions at Hiranora and GFL Charles may be different from what some of the other areas of the island are experiencing. So all of that is taken into consideration. We talk about our flow, our discharge rates at various watersheds of importance that have importance for water supply, so that attendees on the committee understand exactly what the conditions are like. So actually coming from those meetings, it could put us in a position where we come to the conclusion that we may need to trigger an alert. But an alert, you know, you take it up to the next level to get additional information as to exactly what is happening. And of key importance for us is the regional forecast. So information coming out of CIMH and Kharkov, it gives us a snapshot as to exactly what is going on, what it is that we're expecting for 3 months, 6 months into the future. I just want to just give a brief background on that. Back in January, a report came out that we were going into a long-term drought, and persons were calling to find out exactly what it is that will, exactly what does that mean for St. Lucia. Some persons from the media, they wanted information, you know, put that information to the people in terms of, well, what do you do during a drought, or how do you prepare for a drought, and what have you. Now, the Kharkov outlook for November showed that we would have above normal rainfall. And what was coming out, the two didn't really gel in terms of, you know, saying, okay, well, yeah, we're going to a long-term drought, but then we're expecting rain. And as persons can see that for the past few weeks, we've had some showers on a daily basis. If you already observe, probably not probably every day in your area, but around the island, we've had rainfall practically every day. What is different is the duration and the intensity of the rainfall. So even if it's raining, because of the duration and the intensities, doesn't mean if we're looking at for long-term sustainability of our water supplies, that enough is infiltrating into the soil, right? And just talking about it, this is where it comes back to the theme for this year of for World Water Day, groundwater making the invisible visible. So sometimes persons just look at, okay, well, it's raining. So then that means there's enough water long term. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because all the rain that is falling, if the rain stops and it doesn't rain for X amount of time, then we'll probably start to see the effects that, hey, but it was just raining a few weeks ago, but now there seem not to be water available, for use. So what is that? So all of this has to be taken into context, and discussions have to be taken in that regard, where the Met services have to explain exactly what is happening. So it's taking the data and putting it against everything that is happening based on the local information and what is being forecasted, right? So we have had the John Compton Dam. This was to solve the problems in the north of the island that's supplying water to about 60% of the population in the north. The capacity is 700 million gallons, but we know since 2010 that that storage capacity has been diminished significantly. So some studies say by 50, 60%, right? So in terms of putting the alert out that where exactly we're at and what do we have to look for, I think the John Compton Dam is our primary indicator to let us know what mode we normally have to switch to. Because what happened, this is key in terms of when the water stops going over the spillway. So we look at the month, where we're at in the month, and what is the outlook. That would determine what mode that the utility moves into for management. Because key to that is if we go back, if you look at the dam, the dam will look like it's filled to the brim and there is enough water, but then it's key as to how much water you could actually abstract from it, right? And what happened is that one of the major ports had been clogged by silt. So in terms of abstracting, it's 343 feet above sea level, but if you calculating the height downward, you could only access probably about 16 to 17 feet of water, and the structure is over 140 feet. So imagine a structure that's over 140 feet, but your access to water supply where you don't run into problem is only about 17 feet. So definitely when the water stops going over the spillway, especially in the dry season, you have to stand up and pay attention to exactly what is happening there. So definitely strategies have to come into play, because a major source for water storage is compromised. Now, there was a desilting activity last year, January. I think they took out over 80,000 cubic meters of silt, and they had access to a secondary port that they were trying to get to. So now what that means is that if we were to run into a similar situation like 2020, the utility is confident that there would be extra weeks of water availability for the population compared to 2020 before the desilting project. But definitely the desilting activity needs and will continue. Yes, so just moving forward to that. So we in St. Lucia, we have legislation, and that's one of the good things. We have policies, we have acts, we have regulations. So it's very good that we know exactly the steps that we need to take. So if we're looking at from our water and sewage regulations, it says what we need to do. If we see there is an exceptional shortage of rainfall, contamination of water, a serious deficiency of supplies of water exists or is threatened, what steps we need to take? Advise the minister, then we call a meeting, then we notify the appropriate authorities. So we come together, ourselves, the NERC, the Med Services, NEMO, and decision is made as to exactly what it is. We get the consensus, and the minister is apprised. There's the cabinet memo, to move towards doing a declaration if needs be. But at every step, we still need to make sure that what it is that we're doing, definitely there is no other choice but to move in that direction, right? And this is just a copy of the last declaration we did, water and sewage, water-related emergency, and it just said what was prohibited. So it's basically using potable water for non-potable uses because many sectors, all sectors actually use potable water for their activities, even if it's potable or non-potable. So they would use WASCO, and WASCO is in the business of selling water. So, but then in terms of preserving, the water supply and reducing the amount that is abstracted from the dam, those prohibitions were put in place. So this is what we have currently that's existing. So all of that, we realize that there are issues, and looking at it under the umbrella of climate change and what the projection says, in 2016, 2017, activities started to put together a sectoral adaptation strategy and action plan for the water sector. The water sector is not the only beneficiary of this. There's also agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, taking into consideration climate change and how best you can build resilience in the water sector. So the water sector is cross-cutting. So we work with a number of partner agencies. So measures there would benefit persons in other sectors as well. So it's basically a 10-year framework for action to reduce water-related risk induced by climate change and climate variability in St. Lucia, right? And to build capacities of relevant actors for facilitating the sustainable management of water resources and adequate supply of water and wastewater services under current and future conditions. And this document, what it does, it offers a series of 70 prioritized water-related adaptation responses that can be undertaken or at least initiated in the coming 10 years to address the major challenges identified. So it is a cabinet-approved document. So for us, it's a one-stop shop document where it took into consideration all the consultations, all the current policies, the plans, and everything was the legislation and everything was placed in one document where we don't have to go outside of that. It's a living document. We do have 19 project concept notes in the document, but that doesn't mean we're restricted to the 19 project concept notes. We can continue to create new concept notes based on the prioritized adaptation measures we're looking to implement. And here it just gives some other information, additional information on the outcome. So outcome 3, increase water efficiency and conservation. Outcome 2, increase water access, availability, and quality. So it tells you exactly how we're gonna go about to do that. And also to do all of that, you still have to enhance the enabling environment. And so that means new policies have to be created, old policies have to be tweaked, also our regulations, the act. So all of this needs to be taken into consideration. At this point in time, the water resources, we have a final draft of the 2020 water policy. The last policy, water policy, was the 2004 water policy, but it was felt that certain things weren't taken into consideration, especially climate change, and also looking at the strategic plan, because from the old plan, how to move it forward, how do you identify actions that need to be taken and who would be responsible for what? So it's a 2-part document that updated the policy, but also laid out strategic a strategic plan as to how to go about to ensure that we fulfill the mandate that we need to in the water sector. And it's not only the WRMA, but other partners like the NERC and WASCO, for example. So in here, so if you're looking at strategies for coping with declining water, so a number come to mind. So we're looking at reducing, eliminating non-revenue water, sensitization and awareness campaigns, water efficient plumbing and accessories, water quality, increased storage capacity, improve irrigation methods, dam rivers to store water and restart decommissioned intakes. All of those that would just come to mind as to in terms of if we have to employ particular strategies. And if you go into the document, you're bound to find a measure that would speak to one of those points that I have outlined here. So one of the things that we're looking at, groundwater abstraction. It's prioritized adaptation measure 25. So in terms of groundwater, studies have been done, but overall it has been shown that the scope for groundwater is not significant in St. Lucia, but those studies were limited in scope. So right now, what we want is a comprehensive study as to identify whether there are areas for potential sources of groundwater that can be abstracted on a commercial basis. So looking at creating a hydrogeological map. Some areas have been identified as having water of good quality and also quantity, but unless those areas are actually drilled to do the research, it still leaves much to be desired, because definitely you'd have to take into consideration the recharge rate. So this is an area that we need to know for sure exactly where we're at in terms of groundwater. In St. Lucia, our water resources are primarily surface water, but still you can look at it from the point of view that our base flows are sustained by groundwater. So we don't tap into a aquifer, whether it's confined or unconfined per se, but the water we abstract from our catchments, from the intakes that WASCO manage, come from actually are sustained by groundwater. So if it doesn't rain for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and there's still water in our rivers, if you're looking at from the upstream, those are maintained by our groundwater resources, right? Another strategy is to dam rivers to store water and also to restart decommission the intakes, and that happened in 2020 because we only have one reservoir, the John Compton Dam, and the other intakes are basically areas primarily to allow the pumps to suck water. So still, if you look at the data on any given year, you would see that St. Lucia is not a water stress when it comes to precipitation. But when the rain falls, most of that water goes back to the sea. We did a calculation and looking at probably what WASCO abstract compared to what rainfall across the entire island, average rainfall, not taking into consideration evaporation. And WASCO abstracts less than 5% of that rainfall. So it just shows that all that water goes back to the sea. So we depend primarily on consistent rainfall because we don't have the storage capacity. So one of the I know in the past, one of the strategies was looking at whether a dam can be constructed in the south. So we as an agency, we don't really have much information, but this is one that we'd look into to see exactly, well, what was the feasibility of actually doing that? Is it possible to actually build that structure in the south? The other one is actually implementing, those glass fused steel tanks in communities. So when there's enough water, instead it go back to the sea, you could actually store those so persons can use it over a period of time. And under the Dennery and the Vieux water supply redevelopment project, those are components of those projects where it is to increase storage capacity. But can we construct a structure comparable to what we have at JCD? I don't know. Is it possible? Maybe, but that would have to be looked at if we're looking at increasing storage capacity. The other one is additional surface water sources. In 2020, and it was good that we were monitoring an area in Soufrière with the guidance of WASCO that highlighted that they noticed that that area, something is happening there in terms of water resources. And in that extreme dry period, that river and spring, the combined, the flow from the spring flows into the river, and the total volume was actually more than what WASCO abstracted from the traditional source in the Fort Saint-Jacques area during that dry spell. So it definitely showed that this was a source that WASCO needed to look into. So we verified that, yes, it was a good source. So if they're looking for additional water sources for the Soufrière area, this definitely is a place that they can actually tap into to increase the water availability to persons in the southwest quadrant there. The other one is rainwater harvesting. I think rainwater harvesting, this is the one that meets the immediate need of any household. It's nothing new. It has always been around, but I think we need to take a new approach, a new look at it. Some persons say, oh, well, persons collect water, but the water is not potable. It doesn't, I don't think that's a legitimate case. If there are some persons that want to dissuade, it's not a legitimate case, because persons take water from the utility and they store it. And we know that it has a shelf life where it remains potable. But this gives you water on your premises immediately. It's just like I always say, it rains all throughout the year. Even in the dry season, it rains, and we're in the dry season and it's raining. And like I tell persons is 5 millimeters of rain in 10 minutes can do so much on a household level, even if it does not make a dent on a watershed level. So if there is no difference on a watershed level, but on a household level, you get 5 millimeters of rain falling within a space of 10 minutes, you can get enough water to do a number of the activities that are non-potable. And we as an agency, this is one of the areas that we're promoting for additional sources of water, rainwater harvesting. One of the reasons we're also doing it too, even in years where there is good rainfall and there is water available, sometimes the water stresses are with the water utility. So sometimes there is water, but certain areas cannot get access to water from the mains. And I'm also one that can speak to that, because on the weekend, my water from my tank that's connected to the utility, it ran dry, and I wasn't even aware of that. There wasn't water for over 2 weeks in my area, and my tanks are totally full with rainwater. So I was still able to continue to do everything that I needed to do. So this is one area that we'll be promoting in the northern Leeward Islands. Most persons rely primarily on rainwater harvesting. So we're telling persons that yes, the utility is there and they're doing their best, but sometimes there are issues and we can help ourselves. And for immediate effect that persons can see, we would encourage persons to continue with rainwater harvesting. We had a consultancy that ended back in 2019. We had some training for some plumbers and contractors. If you can see the contraption there, to show exactly how to do a proper rainwater harvesting system. It has the first flush. You can put your filters if you want to use it inside. There are other ways to make it portable. Persons just have to learn how to do that. But it can be done. One of the things with that consultancy on rainwater harvesting, we wanted to get a technical and vocational qualifications done with the Ministry of Education. We were actually working with PCU and the DVRP to actually put a package together, but unfortunately, COVID struck, and well, what happened with the funds and a lot of funds had to be diverted, so it fell short. But in terms of if we're promoting it, that you get qualified plumbers to install it correctly for persons who would use it significantly on their property, probably have it connected to their main water systems at home. It's something that can also be used for commercial use as well, but to have persons who are trained to actually install it properly. So out of all the measures, I think this is one that's critical that we can use. Also looking at reducing non-revenue water, this is critical. So if we want to look at additional sources of water, non-revenue water has to be resolved. And also there are measures as to how to go about to do that. And this gives us the authority to go out and look for funding to do that. So it's not only WRMA, but the utility can do that as well. If you're looking at sensitization and awareness campaigns to tell persons to conserve more, this was one of the activities, national consultation that we had in Vieux Fort. It was to promote rainwater harvesting, because Vieux Fort is an area that is always water stressed for one reason or the other. As our agency, we also do our awareness campaigns. Here we were showing persons a simple system of how to filter water, so to make it clean. So you take dirty water, how to do it. We also have our exhibitions. We go to the schools. We also appear on TV as well. So here was a program with NTN. So these are some of the things that we're doing. We also look at water quality, and it's also prioritized, because if we want to increase, so we have surface water, but I mean, if we want to maintain the volumes of water that we have to ensure that the water doesn't get compromised, and even to look for additional intakes maybe on the downstream. So we have to find ways to ensure that the water quality is being monitored, and we can ensure that they don't deteriorate. So those are some of the things that we need to look into. Also looking at water efficient plumbing accessories. This is something we need to. So pilot projects, probably in offices, all part of conserving our water supply. Thank you. This is how far Mr. Jai, I reach. I hope I got the point across as much as possible, in terms of we have a lot of things that are happening in the agency with our partners, in terms of the whole aspect of the strategies for coping with declining water supply. So I thank you all very much. So any questions? Let me go back.
Thank you, Jason. Very well presented session and giving us some perspectives of what you do in St. Lucia in particular, but I think it certainly has relevance for the other jurisdictions who are on this call. So now I would invite you, colleagues, if you have any questions for Jason, please. You can post them in the chat room, or you can, unmute and ask the questions directly. Or yes, I recognize Timothy. Timothy Augustus, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Excellent presentation. I was just, I mean, water is not really my area of operations, but I was interested in how do you deal with the sludge? I think you told me that you told us that you had one reservoir. How do you manage the sludge build up in the system?
Well, right, like I mentioned, last year they took out some of that sludge. So they created a holding area for to deposit that sludge. I mean, even moving the sludge itself can be environmentally detrimental in terms of what flows back into the river, because it's like a slurry. So some of that water does make its way back into the river, but you wait. So you say, okay, well, degradation for a period of time to get the benefit that you wanted, because they needed to get to a second port, right? And they were able to actually do that. So if we were to have a crisis again, like we did, there would be more water available. But the thing is, there is still loads more of silt that needs to come out of there. As to exactly how the utility is going to approach it, I am not too sure, but we as a regulator, we do visit the site and to see exactly what it is that they're doing. And even if like there is spillover, to determine or to find out how long it's going to be and whether there are periods to allow the environment to recover a bit. But it's a very delicate situation that has happened there, unfortunately. And all I can say is that there's a lot of silt.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I recognize Valerie. Please proceed. Thank you for the question.
I think somebody was before me.
Oh, sorry, Silas, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Jason, for this presentation. It was well received. Looking at the number of strategies that are in place to help with the water issue, and also taking note, for example, with the St. Lucia electricity services and what they have, for persons, who want to get off the grid, and the solar, other forms of energy, even biogas coming on stream. What policies have been implemented, or mechanisms that are in place to help support, for example, households or churches if they want to utilize the rainwater harvesting? Is there anything in place to support them, to help them, or is it a free-for-all? Because I'm looking at the way we treat water, sometimes we think, okay, anybody can just go, just rainwater harvesting, and there's nothing to it. Just have a roof and you just put it in the tank. But I don't believe that it is, as simple as that. As somebody who works in water, there is more to it. So what is in place for those who really want to go into rainwater harvesting from a government side? Thank you.
Okay, so well, we had part of that consultancy was also to look at the incentives aspect of allowing persons to move into that direction. But for that, there is a lot more consultations that needs to be done. Before I continue on there, you mentioned about for the rainwater to move. It's not as simple in terms of, persons collect the water. I don't know, because in our design, what it says that, there is we had the first flush system where, periodically you allow that water to not get into your tanks and what have you. But what I realized with rainwater harvesting, you have to be involved, you have to be engaged. It forces you to conserve, it forces you to take certain things into consideration to manage that system. In the past, we had the IWCAM that came in and they did a pilot in the Dennery area, but the results, well, they don't have official results, but just speaking to persons, it was not what they expected, because it just went on the wayside, persons from all socioeconomic bracket. But the thing, what I want to say in that is, back in 2010, when we had Thomas, persons weren't expecting what was expected. We just figured it was a weak hurricane, it would have passed over. And then after that, you found that persons were down in the rivers collecting water, persons that would tell you, bet their life that they would never go down to that particular spot to get water. They were going there to collect water, to do whatever it is that they needed to do. So part of the sensitization is to tell persons that, hey, well, it's not potable, but there are certain things that you need to do. But if you look at it, just the resource itself, any of the others cannot beat rainwater harvesting. That's my take on it. It is something that you can get, and it's there. Whether you want to clean, whether you want to flush your toilet, or whether you want to, wash your dishes, it is there. And even if you don't do it, persons have, let's say, a tank at their home. They don't need it. They have water all the time. And that water in there is 10 years in a tank. They never used it. And then there's no water from the utility. I bet you that they're going to turn to that water and they're going to use it in some capacity. So it's best to tell them, okay, well, this is the case and this is what they need to do. Because there are stresses, even in good years, there are areas in San Lucia that are always water stressed. So I think this is where the quick fix is, and well, I am part of that as well. I have no choice, because I live in an area that is stressed from the utility aspect, and I have to rely on that. So I don't know if there is another solution for that. I'm all ears for it, So, but I'm not sure. And going back to the part, I think you mentioned about the electric, what is in place for persons who want to do solar. There's a cap as to how much solar that you can use on your property. I think it's 25 kilowatts. Actually, the utility, when looking at mitigation, that was one of the areas that they were going, but with the current legislation, it was proving a little bit difficult for them to move into that direction. I think, if anything, the legislation need to be amended, but this is something that I guess part of the the cost benefit analysis, if it's something that that can be pushed. Yes, I know that the Department of Energy, energy section in the Ministry of Infrastructure, I think they were looking into see how best they can assist in that area.
Right, thank you for that one. And Valerie, over to you now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you,
for
Ignatius.
being patient.
Thank you for a very thorough presentation. And as somebody who lives in St. Lucia a lot of the year, normally out of COVID, very interested to hear what's going on, and a very comprehensive plan that you've got. One of the things that I saw was desalination, and I saw a question mark on it, which I was glad to see the question mark, because as somebody who works in the area of water scarcity, and I always say that we don't usually have a water scarcity problem, we have a water storage problem. And what I didn't see as much stressed was instead of desalination, looking at wastewater reuse, because in so many areas of the world, that is what is now being encouraged. Water in, water out. We really don't have a big shortage problem in St. Lucia. If we look at conservation efforts, I remember one time we did a calculation when we were there on the water that is lost from leaking toilets, let alone what's leaking out of the pipes from the utility, which is running at about 60%. But just the toilets alone, we figured it's probably costing you a quarter of your water supply. And it's such an easy fix, you know, a few ECs and it's fixed. And yet it's costing us enormous amounts of water. So if we look at the water shortage, wastewater reuse, conservation and water leakage have to be the things that are put into practice before desalination. And so I was very glad to see you have the question mark there, but I didn't see a lot about the wastewater treatment. I'd rather see us building a really good treatment plant where we can have the reuse rather than putting all the money into desalination, the most expensive form of water, and then we have a brine problem as well.
Yes, well, it is actually a priority adaptation measure in there. Yes, but what I would say is that we as an agency, we are a regulatory agency, but what we do, we facilitate. Now, if you're looking at those kinds of structures, that means somebody would have to take ownership of it, right? So even if we're doing it, but we would have to get buy-in before, if we go down that road, that yes, it is something that, let's say, maybe like Wasco would be interested in doing at this point in time. Now, are they in a position to probably take it on? Because one of the things is, let's say if you get one of those funding agencies to give you the funds, well, then you would probably have to look at in terms of, let's say, maintenance. Are you in a position, because yeah, it can be built, but in terms of maintenance, that's where the cost comes in. So what measures are you willing to put in place to ensure that it is, it pays for itself, so persons using the services pay for it, and what have you. So even before we were to look to push something like that, we would definitely have to get from some entity that this is the area that they're actually looking to move into, because what we do is we just hand over stuff, we just facilitate, we don't take ownership, we don't run or anything like that. So, you know, sometimes if you start something or you try to implement something and there is no buy-in, at the end of the day, it's just looking at you and everybody says yours, you know, so somebody has to take ownership of it. And we did try that with under the GCF, because we have a project concept note for canneries, but we were presented with looking at wastewater treatment, and ran into some issues in terms of, you know, just along the lines of what I mentioned, and it didn't get too far. So yeah, so I understand the importance of it, but then every step that we take, we try to ensure that we get buy-in, because at the end of the day, especially if it's like hard measures or it's not something that is directly to enhance the agency itself, we definitely need buy-in from our partner agencies or the stakeholders, because if not, we won't get too far with it. So but I do understand, and wastewater is something that we've been pushing. You know, the reuse and, you know, implementing in other areas, because the usage is very, very low in terms of the systems that are there. But, you know, there are some complexities that need to be ironed out in there still.
Yes, certainly. Just to follow, there is that there, but there always seems to be the money coming up for desalination plants. So if you do a cost-benefit analysis in a long time,
I would say for desalination plant is only, well, the talk comes up, you know, when things are very, very critical. But once it starts to rain, then it takes a back, you know, it goes to the back, you know, because, and I think that's what a lot of persons expect. Yes, well, sooner or later things are gonna get back to normal, and that's what happens over the years. So persons just expect that, you know, we inconvenience for just a period of time, we can ride it out, you know, so everybody look to me. So if now things are stressed, everybody look to me. By May, things should resolve itself, and normally it does. So persons are very comfortable in that aspect. So then you figure, okay, well, why go and spend the money? And just to add to that, in terms of one of the other things is irrigation. But during the dry season, farmers are very content with irrigation, but during the rainy season, a lot of them are very irritated by having to step over the irrigation systems on there. It's those kinds of things. You only want to see it when you need it. If you don't need it, then that's it. So
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Jason. Before I call on Ezekiel, who has had his hand up for a while, just to say about some of the inputs from Valerie about desal. I don't know that there is such a policy. There's been a lot of talk about it, except for some of the properties, the hospitality properties on some of the coastal areas there are a few of them with small desal plants, but as a policy by the state, I don't know that has. There are people who have, or businesses who are sort of unsolicited, offers of, trying sales and marketing people who go up and down the region trying to promote desal systems. But as Jason has indicated, and you quite rightly said, I mean, the problem I think we have now is not one of so much of a scarcity, except the scarcity is at a certain point in time in the year. But if we are able to store much of the abundance we have during the latter 6 months of the year, then we should be all right to offset the deficits in the drier months. So I'll now invite Ezekiel, because we are running out of time, as there's another session that I have to begin. So go ahead, Ezekiel.
Yes, good evening all. Yes, seeing that the John Compton Dam is your main source, I would assume that during the dry season, that is the system that you would depend on to supply areas which have shortages, right? Now, since the disaster, and that's now it's heavily silted, and you only have, what I think is 16 feet you said capacity. And I've seen the dam. I know the 16 feet is still a lot of water, but I've seen you don't have the 100+ capacity. Are you still able to supply the area the shortages through the dam without causing shortages elsewhere, or you have another source?
Yes, well, you see, the utility have a number of water supply systems across the island. Across the island, John Compton is just one of them. So in the north, we have the John Compton Dam, which is the Phoebus treatment plant, and we have Hill 20. So in times of when you notice that, okay, well, a deficit in rainfall, so then what you do now, you go into some management mode, which normally tends to be rationing. So where if areas persons would have gotten water 24 hours, now they'll probably get water maybe for 5 hours. So you reduce on the amount that you would abstract. So normally I think they would abstract maybe like between 6-7 million gallons a day. So maybe you might reduce it to maybe 5 million. So it's a way that you have to tell persons that they have to start to conserve, because they don't receive water on a regular basis. Outside of that, we still have some smaller water supply systems that are still able to maintain the communities that are connected to them, because like I showed you the drought susceptibility map, there are areas, some of our major water supply systems, if you look at the areas susceptible to drought to some degree, it may go all up to the upstream of the watershed compared to others where it would not. So although the flows are low, but there's in some areas they can still sustain the communities there. But then for the majority of areas, some form of rationing has to go on. And in other areas, whether it's raining every day or not, there are still water stresses. It could most likely due to the supply side. But the John Compton Dam serves 60% of the population. So you know that once it starts to get affected, then things are critical. So the primary thing that's done is water rationing, and then we do the declaration of the emergency, and then you have the prohibitions that persons activities that persons cannot undertake with potable water.
Okay, we have a question in the chat room, Jason. Is there anything that's from Dalcia's Pierre? It says, is there anything in place on the amount of water a household can have stored, or can they store as much as they want?
Well, a household can store as much as they want. Remember, Wasco is selling water, so if you pay them for the water, they don't have an issue with that. You know, the point is to get the water across to persons. So it's up to the individual to know how much water he can adequately accommodate on his premises.
Okay. One of the things that you raised was about, well, you spoke about the abstraction, and you were the one who, well, the agency issues the licenses for abstraction, but the Wasco is the one that manages the dam. The dam belongs to Wasco. Is there a sort of what sort of challenges that you have, because you have to maintain the Water Resource Management Agency has to do the maintenance of the forestry area, or is it the forestry department? How does that work out? Because they are paying you for abstraction of the water that you are, for which you are the custodian.
Yeah, well, upstream of the intake is the forestry department that maintains it. But to answer your question is, if you were to dig a hole in your backyard and you were to fill it, and then you wanted to use that water outside of your household, maybe to sell or whatever, you'd have to pay an abstraction license, because the water in that hole actually belongs to the state. So it doesn't matter who collects the water, that water belongs to the state. So the state doesn't really have to hold the water for you, but as long as you want to use it, you would have to pay the state for the for that water. And it goes for coastal, because in the act it says what water is. So water is estuarine, groundwater, coastal, you know. So all of these, so persons doing a desal, yes. So all of that would be considered water. So it's not only fresh water. It's also saline water as well. So, and that's it. So any water falling belongs to the state.
The other question I would have for you, just before we wrap up, is as you've been advocating for rainwater harvesting, what sort of policies that you have in place or incentive programs to encourage the population to have at least rainwater harvesting as a backup system to the supply from the utility?
Yes, well, we had like I mentioned earlier, the consultant developed a document, but I think the document still need a review, and this time with experts probably from economic development. I think they at one point they were approached to give the feedback on that particular document to see how best the recommendations that were made, how feasible it was, or whether there were any tweaks that had to be made to that document. So the consultant took a lot of things into consideration. I think this was done before, I would say, for example, the tanks were being made locally. So before, the tanks were being imported. So that has to be taken a look at. But one of the things that we do as well, in terms of putting project documents together, concept notes, looking at augmenting water supply, that was taken into consideration, providing certain amount of households in poor areas with tanks, so that they could collect rainwater. study was done by, I think by CAFA, or in collaboration with CAFA, and they had identified certain areas where those persons, especially in terms of being having the stresses, water stresses that, you know, and the socioeconomic background, that something like that could be implemented there. So this is something that we had actually put in a concept note that was submitted to the GCF. Yeah, but it is still in flux.
Right. Well, as all good things, we can go on and on with this webinar this afternoon. There's keen interest, but we must come to an end as some of us have to join some other sessions. But thank you so much, Jason, for this very comprehensive presentation. And you have been able to even field all the questions very well. And I think much of it resonates in many of the other territories who are participating. So we'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and look out again for, as we continue our series every Wednesday, and we will be sending you as usual the recording of this session. And again, want to move a hearty toast to everyone involved in water and wastewater on this occasion of observance of World Water Day. So thank you very much. I'm Ignatius Jean, signing off from CAWASA Wednesday webinar of number 10, episode number 10 in the series for 2022. Bye. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Most welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. Good job, Mr. Jay, as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.